Hello and welcome. I'm Carolyn Grimminter with First Unitarian Universalist Church of Austin. Welcome to the Public Affairs Forum. Our program's mission is to nourish the mind and spirit and serve social justice. Our forums occur on most Sundays at noon and are free and open to the public. We encourage you to attend. Our church is physically located at 4700 Grover Avenue in Austin, Texas. For more information about our Public Affairs Forum, you can go to our church website at www.austinuu.org. And now, I'm going to invite Tomas Medina up to introduce our speaker today.
As Carolyn said, my name is Tomas Medina, and I am the facilitator of First UU's Alphabet Soup Group, which is a group for First UU members who identify as LGBTQ. If you are interested in being supportive of the LGBTQ community but don't identify as a member of that community, you're welcome to come to our Pflag Meetings, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, which have started having meetings here on the third Thursday of every month. And today we have with us the president of Pflag Austin, Anna Nguyen, who will be speaking to us about being welcoming to the LGBTQ community as they come out. Anna is a transgender woman, longtime Austinite, software engineer, and business owner. She is also active in Austin's LGBTQ plus activism. In addition to being the president of Pflag Austin, she is among the leadership of the Transgender Education Network of Texas and the TGQ Social. And she's a bit of a celebrity. The Austin Chronicle named her as one of the top 10 2016 local queer heroes. So I'll give you Anna.
So I was invited to give this presentation, basically on how to be an ally to LGBTQ plus people. LGBTQ plus, just so we have the same understanding, stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and Q stands for queer or questioning, depending on whom you ask, but both are valid. And plus, it's just a catch-all to account for other gender variants and sexual orientation variants. So for intersex people, for example, or for polyamorous people. So how to be an ally. And I noticed that the sign outside say, "and coming out." So I wasn't prepared for that, but a lot of the examples that I'm going to cite have that flavor too. So basically, let's see here, 8 points that I would like to bring up on how to be an ally to LGBTQ plus people. First of all, I thought, well, this is something that if you go and Google how to be an ally LGBT, you get all the information that you need. Pretty credible and valuable information. So really, rather than just, in fact, that's how I did some of the research for this talk. So instead of just compiling all that and presenting them to you, I figure maybe I will present them, but with some of my own experiences and anecdotes. So maybe then make it more memorable or interesting. So the first is to educate yourself. As I said, I did some research on Google on how to be an ally. None of us is an expert on everything. So, and really, I guess maybe given this audience, I suppose that you would be more educated than the average person on matters LGBTQ. But being that nobody knows everything, it's important to educate yourself on the specific area that you need to know more about to support somebody you know. So if somebody you know comes out as being gay or as being transgender, it would be useful to do a few Google searches and see what else you don't already know. So the second thing is be honest. Again, it's that thing about nobody knows everything. We all like to know that certain subject area our life is steeped in, and we know all there is to know. But myself, for example, transgender things, there are still things that I don't know these days. So it's useful to acknowledge that you can always learn. In my own case, an example would be my brother and his wife. So they both work in the technology industry in Silicon Valley, and being Californians, they're fairly left-leaning. So you would think that they are informed and knowledgeable and open-minded, and that I wouldn't have such a hard time coming out to them when I started transitioning. But actually, so I met them and I told them I will be transitioning and I will be living my life as a woman, and that was a big surprise, and not surprisingly, they don't already know, they don't know much about being transgender. I don't think they knew anybody who's transgender. So that they would be willing to acknowledge that they don't know much, that they would be willing to ask questions. That was very useful and very comforting to me, because it tells me that they willing to learn. The third thing on how to be a good ally is that I like to call it dropping hints. So it's usually, for me at least, it's usually pretty tough to just come right out and tell somebody something uncomfortable, or if it's a challenging subject. And I find it easier if I just like give them a hint or two of where I stand, what I believe when it comes to that particular subject area. So for example, if you know somebody who you think might be gay or might be wanting to come out as being gay, and you want to let that person know that you're okay with me, but you don't feel quite comfortable saying, well, if you're gay, it's okay with me. One way I would do it would be to say, I don't know, suggest go see Moonlight with them. For example, if you don't know, Moonlight is this recent hit about a young African-American gay kid growing up in the project. Or Brokeback Mountain, same-sex love story, very sensitive, and the subject matter really well handled in that film. Or if the person might be coming out as transgender, suggest that you go see The Danish Girl with them, and you go see the film, and maybe not act over the top about how you really understand that kind of stuff and really support those people, but just make enough noises so they know that where you stand, and that if they decide to come out, that they have an ally in you. So the reverse of that is also true. If you know somebody who is gay and who doesn't know quite how to come out, one thing you can suggest to them that, okay, maybe one way to come out is to drop hints. In my own case, I see some people I know in the audience, and I think you know this story, but it's kind of fun. So in my case, so I sew, and I make a lot of my own clothes. I made this dress, for example. So before I was out, 1 year at work, we had a Halloween costume contest. So I decided to make a Pan Am stewardess uniform, and I wore that to work. And that was, well, to say that people were surprised is an understatement. But everybody was really impressed, and I actually won the best costume prize by popular vote. So that was Halloween of 2013. When I came out at work on July 4th of 2014, the following year, people, I think, were not as surprised as they would have been if I just came right out and announced my transitioning. They read my email, and I'm sure many of them think, oh yeah, the Pan Am stewardess. Now that makes sense. So for people coming out, I think dropping hints is also a powerful way to bring up the subject. The fourth thing, remember we have 8 things, so we're on to number 4 now. The fourth thing is be brave, be courageous. For LGBTQ plus people coming out, that's a really, really courageous thing, because regardless of how much or how well they know the people that they're in contact with, there's always that last bit of doubt about whether do I really know them that well? Do I really know how they would react? So for gay, bi, transgender people, gender diverse people, intersex people, coming out is an act of huge courage. They pretty much stepping out into the unknown. So in reverse, you as an ally also be as courageous. Speak out when you can, when you see or hear things against the LGBTQ plus community that you know is not right. Recently, as you know, we have this bathroom law happening in the Texas legislature. There were many protests and public hearings and people giving testimonies. One of which was a group of trans people, trans feminine people, i.e. people like myself, and trans masculine people, i.e. people who were assigned female at birth but are now transitioning to live as a man, to present a masculine appearance. So what we did was to go to the Capitol and position ourselves outside of the restroom that matches the gender on our birth certificate. So for us trans women, we would be standing outside the men's room, and for the trans men, they'd be standing outside the women's room, and we would be carrying signs like, "Do you think I really should be using this restroom?" So among us, there were non-transgender people as well. The term is cisgender. So cisgender are people, well, the majority of everybody whose gender identity aligns with their biological sex. So cis and trans comes from, I believe, the Greek roots, and they come from organic chemistries, where you have compounds with the exact same number of elements of molecules in them, but the arrangement of the molecules are mirror image of each other. So then one compound would be called the trans variant of that compound, and the other one would be called the cis variant of that compound. So that's where transgender and cisgender came from. And I guess transgender means what it means because traditionally words like transvestite or transsexual had a precedence. And by the way, don't use those words if you want to be an ally to a transgender person. So anyway, so in that protest, other than the transgender people, there were cisgender men and women who also protested with us. They would carry signs like, I have no issue with this person using the men's room or using the women's room or whatever. So that's one case where an ally can be courageous and show their support and alignment with the LGBTQ plus community. Number 5, listen and be open-minded. This is one thing that I like to do on positions that where I'm against, where I have the opposite stance as somebody else, is to try to argue their position. So for example, climate change. I would try to argue the other side of the argument, try to convince myself that climate change is not real, it's cyclical, it happened again, there's nothing we can do about it, it's not man-made. So by arguing the opposite position and trying to win that argument, I can educate myself in understanding the issue more, and that I'm open-minded and be willing to believe the opposite position helps firms up my position on my actual belief. So one example of that from my life was when I came out at work. So when I came out, I sent a big long email saying, this is me, this is my life, from now on you will know me as Anna, and so on and so forth, and I would like to invite you to this informal meeting at lunchtime where I can answer any questions you have. And one of the questions that was asked was, so what will the restroom use issue will be? And it's a kind of like one of those 800-pound gorilla in the room. Well, that used to be 600 pounds, but you know, inflation and all that. It's a kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room kind of question where everybody is wondering, but everybody is also reluctant to ask. And that somebody is willing to listen and be open-minded and to come out and be courageous and ask that question, that clarifies the company's policy, that clarifies what will be happening. I will be using the women's restroom, and nobody has any problem with it. But now that it's clear and stated, it's everybody has a clear expectation of what will happen. Nothing is left to guesswork. Number 6. This relates back to the be courageous point, and that is to defend your LGBTQ plus friends. Speak up when you hear jokes or remarks that are offensive or damaging to the LGBTQ plus community. Specifically, again, the bathroom issue. For many of us, that's kind of a non-issue because we go to the restroom, do our biological things, and some of us even wash our hands. Then we leave, and we're done. No big deal. But some legislators has taken to believe that nefarious things might happen beyond all that. So they take it upon themselves to enact legislations to forbid transgender people from using the restroom aligning with their gender identity. And that's an example of where you can stand up and be visible and be vocal to let the legislators know that normal cisgender people also have an issue with these legislations. From my own life, this is kind of I don't want to recount this too often because it's one of the low points of my transitioning. But I've never had an issue using the women's restroom until very recently, and this was at the Austin Carnival. Now, if you don't know what that is the Austin equivalent of the Brazilian Carnival, a big celebration before Ash Wednesday, where people get down and get funky and get drunk and be naked. And this is at the Palmer Event Center, and it was exactly all that. People are scantily clad and getting drunk and just dancing to samba and just having a great time. And so at some point I was in the restroom, and these two women security guards came in, look around as if they wasn't sure who they were looking for, and they finally kind of did a double take on me and say, you shouldn't be in here. And I said, no, I should be in here. And they said again, no, you shouldn't be in here. And I said, yes, I should be in here. I can show you my ID. So upon that, they kind of, okay, and they left. After I did my business and I left, I saw these two security guards standing on either side of a woman sitting in a chair waiting. And I'm guessing that she was the one who kind of blew the whistle, so to speak. And the thing that really bothers me wasn't that she had an issue, but that she had an issue with me at a place like Austin Carnival, where everybody is half naked. And she had an issue with me being in the women's restroom. And apparently everybody outside the restroom kind of, I think she made a pretty big hue and cry. So everybody outside the restroom at that point kind of knew what was going on. So when I walked out, people were looking at me, and so several of them came up to me and said that they okay with it, that they have my back, that not to worry about it. And that was actually the really nice silver lining to that encounter. And that's an example of defending your LGBTQ plus friends. Make sure they know you're there, that you support them, that you will have their back in situations like that. Next to last item, be aware of your privileges. And actually, I don't know what I can say about this because this is about where I stopped preparing for this talk. So I'm just going to make it up as I go along. Any given demographics, be it cisgender people, straight people, white people, or African American or Africans in Africa, when you're in the majority, it's easy to forget that you enjoy certain advantages that the people in the minority don't. For example, cisgender people go out into public, no second thought about which restroom they use. Not a big deal, just an automatic thing. But for transgender people, that's a measured and calculated move. They have to, does this place have a single occupancy restroom that I can safely use? Is it a place frequented by people who would likely have an issue with me? Are there anybody nearby who looks like they might be friendly, who could come to my aid if somebody give me a hard time? So if by being aware of the advantages that one enjoys automatically by just being who one is, being white, being straight, being a cisgender person, you would then be more aware of the disadvantages that LGBTQ plus people have, and you would be more attuned to what you can do to support that community. Okay, last thing, yay! Let's see, 25 minutes, that's not bad. So the last thing, and this is a biggie for transgender people, pronouns use. For most of us, it's pretty obvious what, how we address somebody, he, she, they. It's pretty clear. But for transgender people, for gender diverse people, for people who don't have a binary presentation, or for intersex people, sometimes you cannot really tell by just looking at somebody how you should refer to them. Sometimes this is easy. I mean, most people probably figure out that they can refer to me as she, her, but until they hear me on the phone, of course, then I get called sir all the time. But if you're not sure, ask. Because some people don't even use feminine or masculine pronouns, they just use the singular, non-gender specific they, them, theirs, which, by the way, have been declared by the Associated Press as suitable for use to refer to singular subjects. So you can use they to refer to a single person. So some people use that because they don't readily identify as one end of the gender spectrum or the other. They somewhere in between, and they feel that he or she doesn't really fully encapsulate who they are. So ask. That's the only way to be sure. And you will always be correct if you ask and they tell you which pronouns to use. So, those are the 8 things. I mean, there are other things that I'm sure you can find doing a Google search for how to be an ally to LGBT. But I feel that these are the most important ones. And really, kind of like the 10 Commandments, how that boils down to just 2. I think these 8 really can boil down to just 2 directives, if you will. The first is what we just talked about in the last point, to ask. Nobody knows everything. You don't know the person you just met, or maybe even somebody you know well. There are certain areas of their life that you don't know that much about. So ask. That's the only way to be sure. The second directive that these 8 things boil down to is to normalize. And by that I mean, don't handle anything you do for or with the LGBTQ plus community as a special case. It's really not any different than anything you would do for or to or with any other minority group. be it an ethnic minority, the handicapped. You wouldn't treat people of a different race different than you would treat transgender people or a gay person. So by making it normal, making it not different, that's a way to kind of a general guideline that you can use to direct all your opinions and actions and conversation. For example, a straight person wouldn't just go up to anybody and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm straight." And you don't normally say that in an introduction. So by the same token, a gay person wouldn't need to go up to somebody and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm gay." I mean, it really doesn't. In both cases, it's not necessary and not required. Likewise, you wouldn't go up to somebody and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm a man," or "Hi, I'm so-and-so and I'm a woman." Well, the same for transgender people. They shouldn't need to say that neither. So by normalizing your thoughts and actions and conversation to and with the LGBTQ plus community, I think that's the very basis of being a great ally. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today and sharing your story and your vulnerability. I really appreciate that. So now it's time for the question and answer, and I have a question. I'd like to hear more about Pflag, what Pflag has to offer and how we can get involved with Pflag.
Okay. Well, first let me slightly correct what Thomas said in the beginning about Pflag standing for Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. It used to stand for that, but now it's just a word, Pflag. And the reason is as an organization, we want to migrate away from being just a support organization for parents and friends, but as a support and advocacy organization for everybody, including the LGBTQ plus people, including trans people, including intersex people, gender diverse people, to be more expansive. So Pflag Austin, the first, so our main mission in the Austin area are our support group meetings. I feel that that's by far the most beneficial, the most important endeavor that we should concentrate on. We have 4 support group meetings in the Austin area. The details about the meetings are on our website, pflagaustin.org/meetings. And it's really a volunteer-run support group meetings where everybody is welcome. And typically, the attendees are a mix of first-timers, i.e. parents and siblings and friends of LGBTQ plus people who has just come out, for example, and they have questions and they have concerns, they have worries, they need information. The other attendees would be the same kind of people, but returning attendees. People keep coming back because they need information, they need support, their life is progressing and they want to share the latest happenings with their LGBTQ plus loved ones. They have more questions, or they could be just long-timers who want to share their experience and advice to newer people. Also, of course, LGBTQ plus people themselves. That was how I became involved with Pflag. When I was beginning my transition process, the Pflag support group meetings that I went to were easily among the best resources for me. If nothing else, it's certainly very safe and comforting to be among people who understands who I am, accepts me as I am, and who has useful and valuable and actionable information for me as a newly transitioning transgender woman. Beyond the support group meetings, Pflag Austin is also, we also do outreach events like this, for example, where one of the members of the board would go and give a presentation or staff a table at an event, or an educator at a university might invite us to come and talk to their social work class or psychology class about being LGBTQ plus and on subjects such as this, how to be an ally, for example. And finally, the third thing that we do is a little bit of activism. We don't do as much of that, even though the national Pflag organization is heavily into lobbying and activism for LGBTQ causes. In Pflag Austin, we tend not to do as much of that because there are already local organizations that are much more better equipped and experienced at things like that. For example, the Transgender Education Network of Texas, Equality Texas, and more recently, Human Rights Campaign. There are also organizations supporting and advocating for queer people of color like ORGO. So we tend not to leave those activities to organizations that are better suited to do those activities than we are.
I'm the Social Action Chair here at First UU, and we've recently gotten stickers with the pronouns for people to put on their name tags, which I think will be great, but we want to make sure that we normalize that it's not just transgender people who might put the stickers on their name tags, but everybody does. What suggestions do you have for helping us spread the word in the congregation and encourage people who are cisgender to put those stickers on their name?
Well, one approach would be to not give people any choice. If your only name tag say pronouns on the bottom, or maybe if you have color-coded name tags, for example, blue and pink might be transgender, or green might be cisgender. People, if you don't give them any choice, then well, they got to have it on their name tag. But beyond that, I guess the recommendation would be to mention that this is an effort to normalize our relationship with the transgender community, in that everybody deserves to be addressed by the pronouns with which they identify with best.
So still going back to politics, it seems like we were going forward so well, and now we're just sort of in the mud with all this. Well, what are your suggestions for us to help? Besides, here at the church, it's easy for us because we're a very supportive community, but out beyond the church, what are your suggestions?
Firstly, I think the reason that we seem to be going backwards is it's not because people are suddenly a whole lot more close-minded or belligerent towards LGBTQ plus people in general and transgender people in particular. But I think it's more because politicians are beginning to learn that for example, the transgender community makes a great punching bag. So by attacking and marginalizing the transgender community, for example, Dan Patrick, this whole SB6 bathroom bill in Texas elevated him to national notoriety. And maybe that's what he wants. Maybe he's prepping himself for a run for national office. And what better way to appeal to his base than to prove that he's the craziest of crazies. So maybe that's the reason why we have this rash of seemingly hostile and close-minded legislations. Now, as to what we can do about it, I think be visible and vocal works regardless of your cause, whether it's the environment, marriage equality, racial justice, gender equality. The politicians, and in fact everybody, would not know that this is a big issue and is important to a lot of people if few people make noises about it. So anytime you can, if you work near the Capitol, spend a lunchtime, deliver letters to legislators' office, show up at rallies if it happens to be at lunchtime or after work. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to bring a sign. Just be there in person, show the world, show the media outlets that there is a big population who have a problem with legislations such as the bathroom bill. So I think being visible first and foremost, and be vocal if you can, are the most effective things that we can do.
We have a question from Luther Elmore.
Yes, once again, thank you for being here today. And so we here in Austin consider ourselves an open, liberal community. But my question is, compared to other places you might have lived or spent time in, what is your perception on Austin and other cities?
Well, actually, Austin is a place that I've lived in the longest in my life. I've been here going on 25 years now. And obviously the only place that I've lived in since I've transitioned. But I also have roots in New York City, so I go back there very often. But I think that would be not a valid comparison, because New York is on a scale of its own for everything. So, but I think Austin is definitely among the best ranked as being an environment least hostile to the LGBTQ plus people. That said, I think I wouldn't have to go very far outside of Austin to see what the rest of Texas really feels about our community. In fact, last year, the company that I was at had a users conference, and users from all over the country, all over the world came. And I was having lunch with a bunch of them, and one of them said, well, I've never been to Texas before. This is my first time. So I said, well, you're in Austin, so you still haven't been to Texas. So And it's a bit like that. Now, I really haven't lived anywhere else for an extended period of time, so it wouldn't be difficult for me to say, but I think I would agree that Austin is certainly better environments for the LGBTQ plus community.
I have two questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is, you had mentioned some movies in the dropping hints part of your talk. I missed the one that was that you suggested to for if you have someone in your life who you think may be transgender.
Okay, that was the Danish Girl, and it's based on a true story about what possibly was the first transgender person to undergo gender confirming surgery. If you go and see it, you would have seen a biography of my life.
Wow.
Pretty much. And I think it touches on the questions that people would commonly have about a transgender person, and it handled the subject in a fairly sensitive manner without being salacious or sensational.
Thank you. My second question is, you raised 2 points. One is to for people to educate themselves, and the second is to realize you don't know and to ask questions. But I wonder, I think sometimes people are afraid to ask some questions, and I wonder if sometimes that's actually valid. Like, are there in fact dumb questions?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a cliched question, so I trot out the cliched answer, and that is that there is no dumb questions. But you're right, it's a sensitive and an uncomfortable subject. It's be challenging to bring up those kind of questions. But that speaks to two of the other points that I mentioned, and that is number one, to be courageous, just as it is difficult for LGBTQ plus people to come out. It is equally difficult for an ally to ask questions, because one of my point is one of the two recap points that I had was to ask, but there are questions that could be inappropriate. But this is where the other point comes into play, and that is to normalize. You wouldn't ask a straight person what kind of surgeries they have had. By the same token, you wouldn't ask a transgender person that question. So I think by asking, but bearing in mind to normalize your query, I think that would help guide someone as far as what's a appropriate question and what's not. And yeah, I mean, it's an uncomfortable subject, and it takes courage on the part of everybody to both to ask and to answer. The second thing is beside being courageous is to, there's always the option of dropping hints. I probably wouldn't ask somebody if they're gay, just like I wouldn't ask somebody if they're straight. I guess maybe sometimes not asking is the better approach, and that speaks to the normalizing thing. I may be really curious about somebody's sexual orientation, but if it's something that I wouldn't ask a straight person, or if and it goes for all minorities, right? Not just LGBTQ plus people, but say ethnic minorities, for example. Certain ethnic practices or diet. If it's something that you wouldn't ask a white person, maybe you shouldn't ask that of somebody from Somalia. So I think their normalizing thought process would help guide the answer as to whether a question is appropriate or not.
We talked about courage, and I know that you've been courageous in other areas besides this. I know you have solar panels on your roof. You drive an all-electric, zero-emission car. You have a certified wildlife habitat. So you've had courage in doing non-traditional things. Have you seen parallels between those kinds of risk-taking versus your transitioning?
Well, there's probably some parallel. The thing that came to my mind when you were asking that is some years back, when I was a lot younger, my younger brother used to race motorcycles. And then I would tag along with him to the track. And then I wouldn't race myself, but I would help do what they call corner working. And that is just stand at the corner, and if somebody falls down, make sure they get up, pick up the bike, push it out of the way, and that kind of stuff. So some of my friends would ask me, how come your brother races and you don't? And I said, well, maybe either because he's braver than I am or because I'm smarter than he is. So maybe it's a little bit of a combination of both, being environmentally conscious, coming out as being transgender. Maybe it's a combination of a little bit of being brave and a little bit of being stupid. Maybe I don't know what the consequence, maybe I'm not aware of all the consequences, so I'm not as worried. In Vietnamese, we have a saying that goes, that the deaf is not afraid of gunshots. So you can't hear the gunshot, so you're not scared. And maybe it's a little bit like that with me in these aspects of my life, in that either maybe I'm a little bit smarter or a little bit braver, or maybe I'm just a little bit less aware or a little bit more stupid than other people.
So in your experiences, having come into who you are, you've probably been a new experience for some people. And some of those experiences have probably been negative ones. Looking back over those, how do you wish people who don't know enough about the transformation you've gone through, how do you wish people should have responded to you in a way that wouldn't have caused you hurt? Does that make sense?
So I would let me break that down into two parts, and the first is how differently has society treated me after my transitioning, and the second part being how different would I wish these things to be. So the first part is unfortunately kind of enshrined in many cultures, and that is there are a lot of gender expectations of gender behavior and presentation and qualities. As Thomas mentioned, I'm a software engineer, and this is probably will come as no surprise to anybody. After I transition, I do find that, especially with people I don't know or who don't know me, that my words don't carry nearly as much weight as it used to. I'm the same engineer, I know the same thing, the same experience, I've worked on the same project, yet people seems to not take my input as seriously, and that's kind of, that speaks to the some of the gender bias in engineering profession. So that's an example of how society treated a gender differently. Also related to that is, I mentioned that I sew. So before I transitioned, sewing and fashion design is obviously a non-gender typical pastime for a man. Now it's perfectly normal. Nobody thinks that is unusual. However, I also love cars. I've worked on all my cars, doing pretty much all the work. Well, yeah, all the work, not just pretty much all the work. And I know a lot about these because it's just part of my curiosity. I read a lot about things, and I know useless bits of information. So a couple of years ago, I was volunteering as a track marshal at the Formula One race at the Circuit of the America. And during a break, a bunch of the track marshal was heading around talking about cars and stuff. And we were talking about something, and I said something. And everybody looked at me like I had two heads. And I said, what did I say? And then I realized, oh, I'm not supposed to know about these things. So that's another example of why the society has this expectation of gender, and that's a case where I have to be aware of how I present and behave. The second part as to what I wish could be different. I think I will go back to one of the two recaps that I mentioned, and that is to normalize. Something that you wouldn't ask or do to or wish for a straight person or a cisgender person should be the same for a transgender person. Something that you wouldn't ask to a white person, you probably shouldn't ask a Latino or a Russian or a Turk. So by normalizing your approach and behavior and questions and conversations, I think that that will help to alleviate certainly any mistreatment of LGBTQ plus people in general and transgender people specifically. And not only that, it equalizes your interaction with everybody, not just the LGBTQ plus community, but also ethnic minorities and maybe the handicapped or whomever.
All right, I believe we've run out of time. Thank you very much for coming and speaking with us today. Let's give her a hand.
It's my pleasure.